See those lights? That means be quiet. Well, turn the lights down, she said. Is that what that meant? Huh? The heat, probably not on the light switch. You might check with somebody in the engineering department, but Anyway, that sweat you see on Dr. McIlwain has nothing to do with the heat. It's about the heat that's coming now. I'd like to echo my colleagues' appreciation to those who have organized and publicized this event, even though I'm teasing her now. Well, you've done a great job, as well as to those of you who gave up some of your time on a beautiful fall afternoon to be inside with us and hear us struggle publicly with this important debate. With very recent proliferation of symbolic expressions of hate, nooses for instance, popping up all over the country, and with notable public figures such as Cornel West, Michael Eric Dyson, and Bill Cosby publicly addressing the issue, now's a perfect time to have a spirited intellectual discussion about what has been the most powerful and dangerous word in the English language, particularly as it's been used in the United States. My position is this: white folks should never, under any circumstances, use the N-word. I have 3 reasons for this position. Number 1, as a group we've benefited by the use of that word, so we should not use it, nor should we be involved in the discussion about whether black folk should use it. Number 2, the argument that it's a double standard to accept the word's use by black folk but not by whites doesn't hold water. And number 3, even in academic settings, the use of the word by whites should not be normalized. This issue is not, if you'll pardon the expression, black and white. Well, we are. Yeah, we are. Yeah. Ebony and ivory, for those of you who remember. But I'm Stevie, so I don't understand how that's going. It's not black and white. There's a continuum on which we might conceptualize usage of the word. That continuum is bounded by the 2 extremes. On one hand, anybody can use the word under any circumstances. And on the other extreme, no one can use the word under any circumstances. The gray area includes, from the first pole to the second, the following. Only African Americans can use it, and they can use it anytime, in any way they like. Next is only African Americans can use it, but it should be used not to offend, but rather in an effort to reclaim the word, and therefore disempower it. Next, any racial minority can use the word, and they can use it anytime in any way they like. Next, any racial minority can use the word, but it cannot be used in a derogatory manner toward African Americans or anyone else. Next, persons of any race can use the word, so long as it's not used derogatorily and in the context it is understood. That is, the person with whom they are using it understands the way they are using it, and, if black, at least tacitly approves. Next, persons of any race can use it with persons of color who use it in one of the contexts that I just noted. For example, if I'm singing along to my favorite hip-hop song, I don't have to censor myself if the artist uses the word. Next, persons of any race can use the word, but only with respect to talking about its historical power as a symbol and a tool of oppression. For instance, white professors teaching about it may use it in an academic context. So beyond those 2 polarities, we have lots of gray area. Let me now go through my main points, the 3 main points that I highlighted a moment ago, one at a time. Number 1, as a group, whites have benefited by the use of the N-word, so we should not be involved in the discussion about whether black folks should use it. Any attempt to do so is intellectual colonialism. There's no question that whites have been and continue to be important allies in the struggle for racial equality. But there are boundaries to how much we can appropriate from black culture to demonstrate solidarity. There's a fine line between appropriation of expressions, vernacular, mannerisms, etc., and exploitation of black culture. As whites, we're socialized to believe that we are entitled to participate in public discourse in any way that we want to. That's been our right since the 17th century, and any suggestions to the contrary result in cries of inequality and double standards. But there's no double standard if we take into account inherent power differences that are simultaneously a result and perpetuation of white supremacy. The reality is that between the 2 of us, I, inherently, though unfairly, have more credibility talking about race than Dr. McIlwain does. I'm not perceived to have a quote-unquote agenda, though of course I do. But my agenda, moving toward equal power between the races, can only serve to disadvantage my racial group, at least in the short run. So my position's not suspect. This is but one indication of my white privilege. My dear friend, who is, as my 8-year-old calls him, a quote-unquote dark skin, clearly has an obvious reason to want more racial equality. It will take power away from people like me and allow people like him to have more of it. We both have doctoral degrees in our respective fields, and we're both recognized as experts on race, politics, and communication. But the plain fact of the matter is that I am a college professor partly because of the N-word. And Dr. McIlwain is a college professor largely in spite of it. That brings into question not only the notion of power, but the notion of fairness or justice, which leads to my second point. The argument that it's a double standard to accept the words used by black folk, but not by whites, doesn't hold water. Fairness does not always necessitate equality. If both groups were on equal footing with respect to power, both historically and currently, it may. There's absolutely nothing unfair in the notion that African Americans can use the word while whites cannot. Did you ever notice how upset white people get when they argue about this issue? There's one word that white folks can't say. One word. If we examine this through the lens of historic oppression of black folk on this continent alone, the assertion that this one restriction on white folk is somehow a symbol of reverse discrimination is laughable at best. We might consider how this restriction is basically the only widespread power that blacks have over whites. That's it. One thing, one word. Whites disproportionately control the government, businesses, banks, schools, the stock market, rental property, and the entertainment industry. But because they can't say the N-word, whites are discriminated against. It's patently absurd on its face. The idea rests upon the distinctly unfounded proposition that whites who control things are fair and would never use that power in a way that advantages them over another group. It's black folk who are unfair and wish to harm whites. They're angry about slavery. They can't get over it. If the inherent racism in such sentiment isn't apparent, I'm not sure what more I can say to shine some light on it. And in my role as an educator committed to shining that light, I have some very difficult decisions to make. In his opening remarks, Dr. McIlwain claimed that those who don't want anyone to speak the word wish to leave past violence in the past. Maybe so. But he inappropriately, I think, includes me in that category. It's not that I don't want anyone to speak the word. I just know that even progressive whites who have committed themselves to pursuing racial equality must not speak it. And that brings me to my final point. Even in intellectual settings, the use of the word by whites should not be normalized. Dr. McIlwain argues that symbolically bearing the word dooms us to repeat our past. Again, I'm not arguing whether he's right or wrong on that point. In fact, I don't believe that I deserve a seat at that table. But his accusatory suggestion that I am foolish for not speaking it is off base. I do not want anyone to forget the word. We cannot simply erase our past with Orwellian precision, nor should we. Dr. McIlwain and I agree on that much. But my not saying the N-word does not amount to burying it. I address the subject squarely, simply omitting, for symbolic reasons, that word from my vocabulary. I very much want people to remember and struggle with the word and its legacy in a complex and sophisticated manner. But I don't need to use it to urge them to do so. I will not use the N-word. I will not use it on a moat or Dr. McIlwain's boat or with his mother or whatever else. And I will argue vociferously that no white person use it because we have benefited from its power. We are not unfairly discriminated against by not being able to use it, and there are ways to deal with our history without metaphorically piling on the backs of those who have been hurt, struggled, and even died as a result of people who look like me using that word with respect to people who look like him. He implies cowardice on my part with respect to this position. Quite the contrary. I am bravely taking on the word and its legacy in a way that many whites refuse to do.